Hello, guys.
Hey, I invited Raphael, who's an investor of Klima. So
Hi, Raphael. Welcome.
Hello, Charlene. Thank you for the invite, Shuyao. It's great to be here.
Mainly because I don't understand Klima enough. That's why.
That's okay. We'd love to have more friends. So Martin is here. Okay. So Martin, do you want to get started?
Should we wait a bit, or everybody's on Thanksgiving today?
Yes, yes. So I got a number of notices that people cannot make it today. I think that's okay. And thank you for being here, Cody and Rodney.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you for joining this on the holiday.
Rodney is Canadian, though. They have their own Thanksgiving.
Yeah, technically I'm Canadian, so.
Right.
That being the person you invited, is he here too?
Yeah, Raphael is here.
Ah, okay, cool. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, hello. Thank you for joining. Just a second, I need like a different.
Yeah, happy to be here.
And I think it's because of the holiday, right? And
Yes.
the voting participation, has been pretty low this week. I think the two projects, didn't get voted through. Maybe we should just, put the voting proposal on again next week.
Yeah, maybe we should do that, I guess.
Yeah.
We can have it in parallel, I guess, at the same time. And then people either can re-vote or who did vote can vote again, or we just, we see the difference, I guess, if we export the data. Okay, so yeah, show my face maybe. Hi, everyone. So today, this is the 8th Boule research meeting. Today, it's the 25th of November. And yeah, because today is also Thanksgiving in the US, not a lot of people joined us, but we have been thinking that we just do it anyway because we are like a true global organization. And yeah, so today we have we invited Jeff Tang. Is he here?
Jeff said he will be late for a few minutes.
Ah, okay. Yeah, maybe he can also do it in the end, because the thing is that we will replace one of the Boule members, because we have been approached by somebody who is interested. His name is Jeff Tang, and in a way he would replace an existing Boule member, Ryan Kim, who was voted in but never have been part of this course because he didn't have time. And so we asked him if he will, if he's okay if Jeff Tang is replacing him. And yeah, Jeff Tang will maybe join the call later and make a short introduction to himself. And then we've been thinking how we can make this governance-wise like a process, and maybe we have come up with a solution that maybe the other Boule members vote in him in, and then if it's a no, then we see. I guess at the end of the cycle, we anyway have to replace some Boule members, and then we do it in this occasion. And yeah, today there is Cody White, who is like presenting Saddle, and then there's Dubbing presenting Klima DAO. Yeah, quite interesting project, I guess. So I know maybe Dubbing, you want to start, or yeah?
Sure. Yep, I'm more than happy to start. So I also invited Raphael, whom I met in Lisbon, who's an absolute gem and understands everything about Klima. So I will do a basic presentation, and you guys can grill him until post Thanksgiving. I'm sure he's happy to do that.
Yeah, I'll try my best to share what I know about it. Thank you for the
Yeah,
invite.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining. Yeah,
No worries.
I don't own Klima, but I own. I just had time to buy some carbon token.
Oh, I
Little
recently,
bit.
yeah, I
But then I
recently
didn't have
bought,
time to go further and stake it and all this kind. So
yeah,
maybe also not to forget, and maybe that being we ask like the people presenting if they have like a stake in this or themselves are investor or own Klima, just to be of the sake of transparency.
Yep.
So
Yeah, sure. I'm not an investor. I own very little just to understand it. And I've sold many coins, but I think it's a very interesting angle. That's why I want to bring this to everyone to discuss, debate, to vote. But yeah, like negligible little amounts. Maybe Raphael, you can also introduce your background, like your relation for transparency reason.
yeah, actually a friend from Steakfish introduced Klima DAO and its founders to me back in like, I think it was middle of August. And then they're raising the P Klima tokens, which is the equivalent of the P Ohm or the other P Olympus 4 tokens, which is like an option with which like you can take one of the option coins tokens and one of the reserve asset currency, and that'll allow you to redeem it for one of the protocol tokens, which in this case is Klima, and you're only allowed to redeem as a percentage of the total circulating supply. So the vesting period is potentially like it's like many years, but yeah. So I was in the seed round for that, for those tokens.
okay.
Thank you. All right, I'll just get it started. Next slide, please. Thank you, Gary, for presenting the slides for me. All right, so I think what's the most intriguing part of Klima as one of the many fork is that actually has a pretty big mission behind it. So the Klima token is a carbon-backed algorithmic currency, and its mission is really to drive up the price of carbon assets. So that big corporates or people who could, greenwash their operations, buy this carbon emission out of trouble, can rethink about it. It can also spur investment into greener sectors. So I took a really quick screenshots of how many carbon emissions it has saved. As you can see, number of acres of forest, passenger vehicles, liters of gasolines. The price is 1,400 today, but yeah, and with the insanely high APY as most own fork. Next slide, please. All right, so I think perhaps the most important part is to understand the carbon credit market before we go into like how it works mechanically speaking, because it's their own fork. So many people do understand it, but not so much about the carbon credit market. And I personally think it's fascinating. So as it stands right now, the carbon credit market represents the reduction or removal of 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent from the atmosphere. And there right now, 2 types of market exist. One is the mandatory or compliance carbon market. The second is the voluntary carbon market, or VCM. And the VCM is the marketplace where Klima DAO is playing at. So what happens right now is that climate positive projects, for example, forest protection NGO, these are climate positive projects because they prevent people from cutting trees, right, in Amazon. So they produce credits to sell, and then the polluters, so the factories, the clothing production factories, like oil and gas sectors, they buy these credits to offset their emission. So I put in there like greenwashing alert. So that's what happens in the market because these credits are oftentimes very cheap. So big corporates can spend penny just to greenwash themselves. So Klima DAO is trying to accelerate the price appreciation of these carbon assets with its Klima token. So these tokens are right now, these assets, credits are right now traded in VCM. So we're not talking about the mandatory carbon market. Anything you want to add, Raphael, or should I move on?
Yeah. So are you going to talk about like the different types of standards for the voluntary carbon markets?
I'm not. If you could add here, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, so there are two main ones. There's the Vera standard and registry, and there's the golden standard. And the one that's recognized by that's recognized for the reserve of Klima DAO is called BCT, and and for that it's only the Vera standard. And the requirement for that is that it's a Vera standard carbon offset credits that have been produced in 2008 plus. And so anything older cannot be redeemed for BCT. And the way you redeem it is you use something called the toucan bridge, which transfers the carbon credits from the registry to the Polygon chain.
I'm sorry, Ralph, I think I am touching upon that. If we can move to the next slide. I think that's
okay.
Please go ahead. I think it's just a visual for people to understand. Please go ahead. Next.
No, that was pretty much it actually.
Oh, sorry, the previous slide, please. Yep, this one. Yeah. So yeah, just to echo what Raphael was saying, I thought you were going to go deep into the Vera standards. So what happened is like, it's actually super interesting. So they only take projects that's after 2008. And then what's the other criteria? I forgot. 2008.
It has to be the Vera standard, not the yeah.
Yep. So what happened is that they made this the bridge, this these two carbon bridge, and they made an NFT, batch NFT out of these projects. And because this NFT are not liquid, so they fractionalize it into this TCO2 token. And then this, like each project would have different token, but there's still not enough liquidity. So you can deposit everything into a BCT carbon pool. And then you can withdraw the BCT token from this pool. So basically, one BCT is one base carbon ton and 1 ton of carbon emission reduced or removed. I'll give you a visual idea. If we can go to the next slide. So that's like 1 metric ton. I thought it was interesting, but not relevant. Okay, any questions so far of how the carbon market works with Klima's treasury?
I don't think so. Yeah,
Okay.
let's go ahead.
Next slide, please. All right, so how does it work? So the Klima DAO would buy and hold these credits, right? So they buy these credits, they lock them in their treasury, and that would cause a supply squeeze. Oops, pardon the typo. A supply squeeze in the actual market because it's just not enough supply. And then they hope the carbon credit price would appreciate, and then there's a big assumption here, but I think it's a very viable assumption, is that the demand for credit would also rise, right? So it's not the supply shortage, but there's also a huge demand spike. So the carbon market is estimated to reach 50 billion by 2030. I think right now it's 1 billion. So think about it, there's a 50x increase in the next decade. And then when carbon credit becomes too expensive, then corporate can't buy their way out. So that's how Klima can have an impact on real life. Raphael, you want to add anything?
No, I think that's a good summary of what they're trying to do. Yeah, so increase the price, increase the demand, carbon offset credits are more expensive. So that'll incentivize people who run these projects, who start these projects to sequester carbon, to do it at a larger scale, or like incentivize more people to sequester carbon, and simultaneously it disincentivizes companies to produce more carbon and try to produce less of it in the first place, because it'll be more expensive to offset it.
If there's no more question, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so similar to Olympus DAO, it's an Olympus fork. So it's a protocol managed treasury. It's a protocol on liquidity. There is a bonding mechanism and there's a staking mechanism. So I'll just quickly talk about the bond and staking. If we can go to the next slide. Let me. So yeah, so basically, oh, thank you. It takes, yeah, so basically you can, did I just go on mute? Can you guys hear me?
We hear you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Basically you can buy a share of, so same as Olympus, you can buy a share of the liquidity at a discount. So for example, if Klima is trading at $100 and the price of the carbon is at $10, then you have to bond like 9.5 tons of carbon to mint one Klima. So that's like a 5% discount. And what happens is that this allows Klima Treasury to increase its purchasing power beyond the use of BCT, and then increase the supply of the Klima token. And you can buy them, yeah. So these are the 3 pairs you can buy. Raphael, you want to add something?
Yeah, so it allows them to like mint more, just like Olympus, like mint more of the Klima tokens because they have more underlying treasury that's backing them. Yeah.
Yep. So they always have more than 1 ton of carbon. So, but that's actually the part. Maybe we can go to the next slide. The part where they're using this rebasing mechanism to. That's the part that I'm actually not very clear, but maybe you can help explain more. But yeah, so the staking part is like you can stake your Klima to get S Klima with like insane yields. So I don't know, Raphael, can you explain more here how this one works?
Oh yeah, so rebase just means because they're minting more tokens every 8 hours, like some of the inflation or like the expansion goes to the stakers. So like your staked amount increases proportionally. It's like, yeah, it's all that really means. And then the rest rebase 0.5%, 3% is for the 8 hours. And then if you times it by 5, it's like 3 times 15. It's like roughly 0.53 times 15 is 8.21. If that makes sense.
So yeah, basically the longer you stake, the more yields you get.
Yeah.
At rebase, it's once a day or
It's 3 times three times a day. It's once every 8 hours.
Okay.
And then so what I said about the multiplying by 15 is because it rebases 3 times a day, and then it's also compounding. So 3 times a day plus 5 times 5 days is 15 times. So you're taking 0.53, and then you're essentially doing that 15 times in 5 days. So that's how they get at the 8.21, but it's slightly more than timesing it by 15 because you're compounding your gains every time you rebase.
Yes, okay.
So basically by staking, you are like sharing the profits, right, of the treasury because from the increase of carbon, that's how you become part of that and get rewarded. So yeah, it's proportional to the amount of Klima tokens in a stake and then duration of the stake. And then the longer you stake, the more yields you get. Next slide. Yeah. Do I have more slide or? Oh yeah. But yeah, that's it. Anyone has questions, concerns?
Yeah, I think you know the project is very ambitious, right? It aims to build a reserve currency based on carbon credit. So, Raphael, can you explain a bit more about BCT? Because I'm not very familiar with how carbon market operates. So, you know, like what's the authority behind this, right? And, you know, by holding that token, you know, what's the value eventually I can get out of it?
Yeah, so there are two types of carbon markets. One is the regulated carbon market, which is it's essentially not tradable for external parties. It's only so it doesn't. So the government has like has a fixed amount of carbon offset credits. They kind of release every year, and that's designated or given to like the companies or entities within like each country, and each country kind of does it differently. And then they're given a certain amount of allowance to produce this much carbon offset credits. And then if they go less than what if they produce less than what they're allowed to, it kind of rolls to the best of my knowledge, it rolls over to the next year. Or if you produce too much, you either have to buy from someone else or add to it. But that market doesn't really pertain to Klima DAO. It's only the voluntary carbon offset credits. And that is also regulated, or like you can be penalized for producing too much or what you're allowed to produce. So that's why they buy carbon offset credits to reduce their overall carbon emission. And yeah, so if the demand for it increases and it's all bought up, the price of it will naturally also spike, and it kind of incentivizes corporations to produce less. Because if the cost of producing the carbon offset credits is not so high, so they can just like buy cheap carbon offset credits to offset it, then they don't really have reasons to stop what they're doing. So essentially they're trying to stop that and incentivize people who have like empty farmlands to start sequestering carbon sequestration projects, so that the reward that they get in terms of the carbon offset credits is like more valuable. And then for investors of Klima tokens, because how it works is for the investors, investors collectively, they raised 70 million Klima. So they sold 70 million Klima tokens to investors at a price of $0.10, like 10 cents per token. It's exactly the same as what the Olympus DAO P tokens were sold for. And then investors collectively can only redeem 3.5% of the total the current circulating supply. So for them to redeem everything, it works out to their being required one or like 2 billion Klimas in circulating. So it's like I don't know if that's even possible. Like we can get to that many Klima tokens. So currently it's like 600 million. Oh, the 600,000. Sorry, 600,000. So it's like not even million. So we're not even like 1% of the way there, or 0.1% of the way there. So, so what happens is the Klima token holders, because they're incentivized to have the protocol running for a long time, so they can vest all the tokens, are incentivized to not to keep the protocol going and not be responsible, like not dump too much on the market, and make sure that there's a constant supply of carbon offset credits that are being bonded to the reserve so that more can be minted and then supply can go up. Because if you don't bond it, like the supply can't go up. So eventually it reaches a bottleneck, the protocol. So I recently bought a significant amount of carbon offset credits. I bought like 100,000 tons to contribute to the bonding. So the Klima investors are incentivized to do that. That makes sense.
Thanks. Yeah, I have one question. This is more like somehow you have a, but I don't understand. This is you have like a radical problem basically because you have this. Where is the carbon coming from? Does the Klima project like looking for a project who reduce their carbon emission, or how does it work? What does the Klima DAO do basically, except that having this mechanism, but what's the DAO doing except this running this system?
So the question is, so is it the question about the own mechanics, or is it the...
No, it's not about the oil mechanics, but what I don't understand is, somehow these carbon tons you have or you get, how they come into existence. So you buy them from the market, or
So there are two ways. You can buy so you can make a Vera registry account, and then you could, and then you could go and buy the carbon offset credit certificates yourself, or you could have like a broker or like providers sell it to help you get it, find it and buy it. And then the carbon offset credits are like in certificates. So it'll say like produced in which year, from which project, location, and how many carbon offset credits of sequestration the certificate stands for. So you take that, you buy it. You either buy yourself, you buy it through a third party, and then you can bridge it yourself. So you go to the Toucan Bridge platform protocol, and then you retire the certificate, and basically the same data is transferred over and like put on chain in the form of NFTs. And the NFT contains metadata of that specific certificate. So it'll say, this NFT is containing this many BCT or carbon offset credits. Yes. And then you fractionalize it to get the equivalent number of BCTs.
But you buy. This is like a market, and all the customers bring them in go over the Toucan bridge, or is it like the Klima DAO itself, or is the Toucan bridge is run by the Klima DAO?
Oh yes, it's essentially, there are many projects who had the ambition of on-ramping or putting carbon offset credits on chain, so they could find more value on chain in comparison to the meat space, the real world. And so the CTO, Archimedes, actually ran like a on-chain, like a carbon bridge himself, like created one himself. And there are a couple other teams that also did that, but they all joined forces and they focused on different things. And ultimately, they used a bridge called Toucan, which was originally called CO Toucan, like the CO2 and then KEN for like tokens. And that ultimately was the one they decided to use. So they are, when they pitched it to me, they said they're essentially like the Maker DAI and the Olympus DAO in one protocol, because they're the ones who on-ramp the carbon offset credits through the Toucan Bridge. And the Toucan Bridge is essentially part of the Klima DAO team.
Okay.
Thank you for the background. Did not know all of this.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, more questions?
This was super awesome. Thanks so much for the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Shuyao. Thank you for the invite.
Feel free to stay for the rest, I think, Cody's presentation.
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we ask Cody to present Settle. All I know about Settle, that is like a rewrite of Curve in Solidity, basically. That's not a lot. And I know a lot of Curve, but I don't know anything about Settle, except they did like an airdrop for V-curve holders 2 weeks ago or so. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, you kind of kicked it off a little bit there. That's more or less accurate. Let me share here. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like Martin said, taking a look at Saddle today, it's effectively, very similar to Curve, a rewrite in Solidity of Curve's stable swap algorithm. So decentralized AMM for pegged value assets, like stable coins or like wrapped versions of Bitcoin and things that would be essentially fungible. The team is really cool, really solid, committed to open source software collaboration. There's a bunch of different protocols that have sort of used their implementation, and so they're really open to like working with other teams building in DeFi and just coming together to like build cool things. So I think like from an ethos perspective, like a really cool project to align with. And their contracts were audited by 3 of the top well-known auditors in the space. So have a little bit of assurance there, but obviously, you know how that goes in DeFi. Just a few stats. Their TVL and volume. It's obviously it's no curve at the moment. Fairly sort of low amount of TVL and cumulative volume on this compared to some of the bigger protocols. But you could look at that as a lot of room for growth as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But there is a fair amount of traction for this as well. So onto the strategy here, to sort of skip right to that, because I think most people are probably familiar with Curve, so we don't have to go too deep into how all that works. But it's effectively a very similar setup, just with sort of their own strategies in mind. So the strategy that I'm looking at right now is this D4 pool, which essentially is you deposit any one of these 4 different stable coins. You have ALUSD, you have FEI, FRAX, or LUSD, and these are sort of newer sort of stablecoin protocols. Some like algorithmic, some like debt backed, some sort of like interesting mechanics. So you sort of have an option of what to contribute. There's each sort of have their own way to get the stable coin, but there's really liquid markets, and like if you don't want to mess around with all the fancy stuff, you can just swap it on Curve or Uniswap, and like there's barely any slippage. So it's really not too big of a deal to get these assets. But if you wanted to use this in sort of like a layered strategy where you're farming something else and you have debt that you can mint or something like that, like you could sort of layer it on with other strategies if that became part of the picture at some point. So from there, you basically would just deposit the LP tokens to this My Farm section, which I'll just show you on the UI here. Basically, you add your liquidity in any one of these tokens, all 4, whatever you want to do. You can sort of align it with the reserves of the pool to get lower slippage, or go with the lowest asset and reserves to get a little bit of positive slippage, maybe. And then you basically go here, you stake it to My Farm right here, and you sort of start earning the rewards. And what's kind of cool about this pool that I like is you get rewards in 4 different tokens, basically the governance tokens for all these protocols. And as you can see, it's a fairly compelling yield right now on stablecoins at 28% with a little bit of APY from swap fees and things like that. So I think the return profile is fairly attractive. You have a little bit of return from trading fees from flash loans, basically. Volume's like pretty low on some of these pools, so this could tick up, you know, a few percentage. Like, I mean, you can take like some of Curve's more traded pools as maybe a proxy for what they could get to if there were a decent amount of volume for the amount of TVL in there. Then the reward APR is really sort of the meat of the strategy, which is, I think, a pretty good baseline yield for stablecoins. And again, you get that in 4 different governance tokens. So you have a little bit of like diversity in your rewards, and sort of allows the DAO to accumulate a variety of different coins here that could become pretty interesting. And then the next part of it, there is this bonus yield component as they just launched their governance token, I think like last week. And like Martin sort of mentioned, they did a bit of an airdrop for, I think it was like VE curve holders. And so they had like a lot of different community involved people sort of get an allocation to Saddle just from like being part of the ecosystem, which is pretty cool. Right now, this yield is unknown because the Saddle tokens are non-transferable for, I think it's at least 3 months, and then it's eligible to be voted on. Which, I mean, you have to imagine they'll probably enable it on the shorter end, but it could be up to 12 months. And then at that point, anyone could enable transferability. So you're looking at a max of 12 months, but I wouldn't expect it to get there. Like, no one's going to vote no, I would imagine. That's just not how it happens in crypto. But for this bonus yield, you sort of can make some assumptions and come to maybe a reasonable return that you might get. So just like a little quick and dirty rough calculation, you have 35 million TVL in the D4 pool, which is around what it's at now. The allocation to this particular pool is, you know, close to 2.5 million Saddle. That's for at least 6 months, which is their first reward period. So equals out to about 13, 14K Saddle per day for the whole pool. So you do some sort of quick valuation math at just, you know, different levels of fully diluted value, and you can get like up to a fairly compelling APR just on this. And like, as you know, with, you know, new DeFi protocols, and this fully diluted value could go way higher. Who knows? There'll be a pretty, I think, low-ish float to start. So, you know, I wouldn't think that this is on like the really low end, but again, it's speculative. But it adds like a nice little bit of juice to the strategy with some extra upside. So if you maybe didn't want to take that variability in the Saddle token there, you could alternatively stake the LP tokens in Frax. And this sort of allows you to lock your stake for a period of up to a week to a year. And then the max boost you can get is 2.5x by locking up to a year. Which is sort of done through Frax's like collateral and like emissions strategy, which I won't get into a lot here. I'm not really, you know, an authority on that, I would say, but you know, it could be a pretty compelling option if you say wanted to set it and forget it for a long time. You could boost that like 28% base APR up to like a pretty compelling amount on stable coins, up to like 69, 70%, something like that. So that's, you know, if you wanted to boost it for a long time, but even if you wanted to do sort of like bi-weekly or monthly epochs, like you could get a decent extra percentage out of the strategy if you weren't expecting to move it around very often. So that's sort of like an alternate if you didn't want to take the variability on the Saddle tokens. Personally, I probably would go for the Saddle strategy. Like, I think it's worth the potential upside in that token. But you know, it's sort of up to personal preference there, which you could probably do some optimization around, but sort of an interesting alternative here. And then with the variability, or sorry, not variability, the diversity of the rewards you get Frax, Alchemix, you get Tribe, which is Phase, Governance Token. There's a decent amount of yield opportunities on these reward tokens as well. Just a quick example here, the tokamak reactors have a really compelling APR on like single-sided deposits for these. So like, down the line, as you accumulate rewards here, there's a lot you can do with these tokens as well, not just sort of have them sit there in the DAO's treasury or whatever. So you can kind of layer that on there and make a good amount just on the tokens that you're farming for, which is pretty cool. So just some pros and cons with this. You know, I would say a pro is the multiple assets. You get a broad exposure. As you'll see in the cons here, like you also have exposure to those protocols. So like any sort of vulnerabilities in any of the four, you sort of have some risk there. But you know, that's it. Maybe that cancels out. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I think it's like more compelling than not that you have the exposure to the four versus sort of one of the newer stablecoins. I think it's also like pretty straightforward strategy. It's not that hard to understand, at least in my mind. So I don't think it's like too crazy to wrap your head around. You also have some extra upside with the saddle token. You know, you could see yields into like say 40-50% perhaps, who knows. And you have L2 integrations there. They're on Arbitrum right now. There's I think one pool on Arbitrum for a couple of stable coins. And right now I think it's just the saddle token yield there. But the TVL is I think very low on the Arbitrum pools. So you could, see there's 11 million, which that has actually grown quite a bit in the last week or two. But you know, for the amount of saddle that's allocated for this pool, that works out to like a pretty decent APY, just because of the low TVL. So you know, down the line, if Arbitrum was closer in our roadmap, that's also a compelling option there too. Like I said, you sort of bear risks of 4 stablecoin protocols. In my mind, you could take this as a pro or a con, but it's there. You kind of have to keep that in mind. I think maybe capacity isn't as big as some other stablecoin strategies, but you know, you sort of have a good baseline yield right now, and with the saddle upside, it can still, even if you know the TVL doubles per se, like it could still be a pretty compelling amount on stablecoins. There is some chance that like saddle works out to be like a pretty say bad reward, I guess you could say. Like, you know, if saddle launched and wasn't doing too well, like then the yield is fairly low in that case. But I think like for a protocol to sort of get in early with and get some yield where there's like not a whole lot of hype about it, probably because of that governance lock, and that there's no, you know, stated APY number for this yet, because there's no price. So like a lot of people aren't seeing that flashy number and aping in. So you sort of have a little bit of opportunity there to get in with without everyone else jumping in behind you. And then you don't have a ton of volume on this one right now. So the yield from fees isn't really, it's really pretty negligible, but that could definitely grow a bit. And, you know, I don't think anyone's really, you know, worrying too much about the yield from fees on these protocols, because they end up being pretty low and they're usually incentivized in other ways. Yeah, that's pretty much it from the overview there. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I don't have questions right now, but I think it's interesting. Yeah, I didn't look close to Saddle, and I just maybe to highlight that the difference maybe is the curve is not open source, like in licensed open source, so you can't just copy the code basically. And maybe this is one of the difference here, that they are truly open source, and maybe they have like a market fit there, because some of the protocols, they really care and they don't want to work together with protocols who are like closed source.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, like been part of it. Like certain protocols have gone with saddle pools instead of curve, just sort of with some alignment an ethos there, and maybe
Yes.
with the team more willing to help out and work with integration and things like that. So I think it's a fairly like compelling alternate to Curve in that way.
But this means the pool you showed, so that the project themselves pay for this at the end. So they voted somehow to end up on Settle, and they pay for the liquidity basically. This for
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty similar to Curve, except for the Curve emissions, obviously. But like, yeah, the different protocols have, incentivize various pools. Like you have the Aleth pool, which is Alchemix emissions here, which give you the rewards. See something like this is just like a base stablecoin pool. There's basically no APY. That's basically because there's not a whole lot of swaps going on this, but also there's no like additional rewards. This is just DAI USDC and USDT. So those protocols aren't paying for rewards there. So you have the saddle emissions on top on most of these pools. So like there's no stated APY on this, but like eventually that becomes like a real amount of rewards. If you just do a little bit of math, you can kind of get some idea of what that might work out to be.
Yeah, different. I think mostly there's like room for, I think like maybe say it's a copycat, it's maybe, not the right word, but for my take, I guess, there's enough room for like protocol doing the same basically, or more or less. And most of them have then over time differentiate. One goes in the other direction and has make it maybe another like market share on the other community. And then, the development
Totally.
is like going in other directions.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
And Curve has like some, they also have like some, not governance problem, but now with the convex and all this meta governance stuff somehow. Yeah, it's not, I see the risk that there's like things going on that somehow that the ownership of Curve is somehow disputed over different protocols, and they have so high stakes that they have a lot of influence. Where is it going? So maybe it's not very well decentralized in the future. Curve, it could happen basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Anything else?
Questions? Other questions? So you say they're an Arbitrum now, an Arbitrum first.
Yeah, Arbitrum right now. There's only one pool. Obviously not like that many things in Arbitrum to swap just yet, but obviously that's growing a lot. I think the Arbitrum yields are pretty good actually with the low amount of TVL. I haven't run the math with the past couple of days, but I think they're pretty good there. And they'll be adding other stuff from what I've seen. They I'm sure they plan to sort of go to anything that's easy to deploy on.
Yes.
So definitely like L2 opportunities as well once things get bigger there.
Yeah, I think for fresh, sometimes it's not easy to choose, which one you want to use, basically.
Yeah.
If you have limited resources, it's not so easy, Curve just deployed like everywhere, but okay, so
a lot more resources to deploy
looks like
a bunch of places.
Looks like basically. Although there's not a lot of information how big the team is or anything about this. It's unknown. It's somewhere hidden. Okay, so if there are no questions, I guess we then go to the last part, and this is maybe Jeff Tang presenting himself and telling why he's interested joining us. And go ahead, Jeff. Welcome.
Hey guys, sorry I joined a little bit late. Quick intro. My name is Jeff Tang. I've been in crypto high frequency trading for the past 3.5 years at a firm called BTG. Pretty low key firm, but it's we've been trading crypto since 2012. I joined in 2018, and so we've been doing centralized crypto trading on about 100 exchanges and pretty top tier. Don't have too much kind of like presence in the space. However, on a few exchanges, we're relatively known. For example, on BitMEX, our handles have a Autumn Wolf. We've generated
that's you.
over over a few thousand bitcoins there over the years. But yeah, and so in the middle of this year, pretty small shop, we actually decided to call it a day, and so the main founder of BTG decided to retire, and in 2021 and before have been kind of like yield farming, DeFi, doing some crypto venture with a buddy who runs a shop called Tarion, and so I've done quite a few investments in the space, and including DeFi. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So my focus is mostly on centralized trading, centralized exchanges. However, I'm really interested in a lot of the things that have come up in Aladdin, and invested in a few of these projects as well. I'm particularly interested in things that are related to financial engineering, which is what I studied in college. So 11.0 are things that I find extremely interesting, and really hoping to learn a lot and to share in the future with you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Jeff. So Jeff has been actually nominated by Ashwin, partner at Dragonfly Capital. So Ashwin was one of our initial backers of the DAO, and because rank him from this cycle, he basically doesn't have capacity to fulfill his commitment, and he is happy to give his seat to Jeff. So Jeff going to post a proposal on the forum, just to talk about his background, and also why he wants to be Aladdin board member, and why he can excel in the role. And we will have a community vote on this, and to see if this goes through successfully. And we'll be very excited to bring Jeff on board for board members for cycle 1.
Yes. Yeah, I think this makes sense also because we are not, I have been assuming we have been 30 pool members, but in fact we're only 28. And so we should fill it up if possible. And yeah, I guess we will see what's coming back from this, but if you make a forum entry, I don't think will be a lot of discussion, and then we will vote about this, and I guess it's pretty seamless. And yes, so maybe if there's no other thing to discuss, or I know, yeah, Tom is not here today on the call. He's also off.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Have a nice
Thanks,
day, and enjoy if you're meeting your family or friends. Then we close here. See you next week.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Take care.